Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we've got an incredible story to share with you. Back in 1998, Marco Castillo was in a car accident that nearly cost him his life. During that close call, Marco had an amazing vision about the future, hinting at a major event set for September 2024. Get ready for a story filled with emotion, mystery, and some surprising twists. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any details of this unforgettable journey. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Marco Castillo, and I've got a story that changed my life completely. It happened a long time ago, but it still comes to mind every time I think about it. It was a summer night in 1998, and I was just 18, about to head off to college. I was young, filled with dreams and plans for the future. That night, my best friend Santiago and I were getting ready to go to a party. It was supposed to be just another fun night, but it turned out to be the moment that split my life into two parts: before and after. I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a vibrant city with a rich cultural mix. My parents are from Mexico, but I was born here in the States. I grew up in a big, noisy, and loving family. I was always the calm one, enjoying my studies and books, while Santiago was the opposite, outgoing and always ready to have a good time. We met in high school, and despite our differences, we became inseparable. That night in 1998, I was excited about the party, but also feeling a bit nervous. It was the summer before college, and I knew a lot would change soon. Santiago and I had plans to attend the same university. I wanted to become an engineer, while he dreamed of being a lawyer. We had so many plans and hopes for the future. I remember spending the entire afternoon getting ready for the party. I picked out a simple shirt that I thought looked nice, and then Santiago showed up wearing a loud, printed shirt, totally his style. We took off in my old red sedan, a car I got from my parents when I passed my driving test. So many adventures happened in that car. If only I had known what was coming, would I have chosen to stay home that night? It's tough to say. The experience I had was terrifying, but it also changed me in ways I never expected. It shifted my perspective on life, death, and everything in between. Let me backtrack a bit and tell you how a regular night of fun turned into the craziest and most surreal experience of my life. It was just a typical summer evening in Santa Fe. The heat from earlier in the day had eased up, but you could still feel that warm desert breeze. Marco and I headed out around 9 p.m., and the streets were buzzing with people enjoying their night, hitting up bars, restaurants, and parties. I remember we cranked the car radio up to the max, blasting the Latin hits that were everywhere back then. Marco was belting them out, totally off key, and I couldn't help but laugh. We felt carefree and super happy. The party we were headed to was at a friend's house on the other side of town. It wasn't too far, but we had to make our way through the city center. As we drove, we started chatting about our dreams. Marco was really pumped about becoming a lawyer, talking about how he wanted to fight for people's rights. I was sharing my plans to focus on environmental engineering. I wanted to do my part to save the planet. We were getting close to downtown, the city lights whizzing by outside the window. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was 9:37 p.m. Funny how some details stick in your mind, right? We approached an intersection, and the light was green for us, so I kept going. Then out of nowhere, I saw a yellow flash in my peripheral vision, a school bus barreling towards us, and it didn't seem like it was going to stop. I barely had time to process it. One moment, we were chatting and laughing. The next, there was this deafening crash of metal smashing into metal. The force of the impact knocked the breath right out of me, and the car started spinning. Everything became a blur of colors and lights. I could hear glass shattering, probably the windshield, and then I felt something warm and wet running down my face. Definitely blood. When the car finally stopped spinning, there was this eerie silence for a few seconds before I started to hear screams, car horns, and sirens in the distance. I wanted to move, but my body just wouldn't cooperate. I turned my head with a lot of effort and saw Marco. He was still there, eyes shut. I tried to call to him, but no sound came out. A wave of pain hit me, spreading through my body, and my vision started to fade. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was wondering if I was going to die. I can't tell how long I was out of it, maybe seconds, minutes, or even hours. The next thing I felt was this odd sensation of floating. The pain was completely gone, and it was like my body didn't weigh anything at all. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did, but I wasn't in the wrecked car anymore. In fact, I couldn't recognize where I was. Everywhere around me was a bright white nothingness. There was no ground, no sky, no walls, just this soft, welcoming light filling the space. Looking at myself, I realized I could see through my own body. It felt like I was made of this see-through material, almost like glass but flexible. I wasn't cold or hot, and I didn't feel the urge to breathe. It was a feeling of freedom I couldn't really describe. I tried to call out for someone, but no sound came out, because I didn't have a mouth or a physical body anymore. I was just a consciousness, pure thought. That's when it hit me. Had I died? Was this what happened when someone passed away? Oddly enough, I didn't feel scared. Instead, a deep sense of peace wrapped around me, as if all my fears and worries had been left behind with my physical form. Then I sensed a presence nearby. I didn't see anyone, but I felt I wasn't alone in this place. A voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, speaking not with words but directly in my thoughts. "Fear not," the voice said. "You're safe here." I wanted to ask where I was and what had happened, but before I could even get my thoughts together, the voice continued. "You're at the border between worlds. It's not your time yet. There's much for you to see and learn before you go back. Turn back." So I wasn't dead, at least not for good. A flood of questions filled my mind, but before I could look for answers, I felt a shift around me. The white light started changing, colors began to appear, and shapes began coming into focus. It was like the world was being painted right in front of me. Next thing I knew, I was floating above the scene of the accident. Down below, I could see my car, all smashed up with glass scattered across the road. Police cars and ambulances had shown up, and I watched as paramedics rushed to help the injured. A crowd started to gather, and seeing all of this from above was shocking. It felt like watching a film, but it was the movie of my own death. I saw them take my... As I watched the scene unfold, I saw Marco being taken out of the car on a stretcher. I wanted to shout that I was okay, and that I was up there, but I realized nobody could hear me. I felt this gentle pull, like something was guiding me away. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I knew I was about to start the most incredible journey of my life, or maybe my afterlife. As I got pulled away from the accident, I sensed a presence beside me. I turned my awareness, and that's when I saw something unforgettable. There was a being of light. Calling it an angel doesn't quite fit, but it's the best way to describe it. It had a human-like shape, but it was made entirely of light. No wings or halos like the usual angel stories, just this bright, welcoming presence. The being looked to be around 30 years old, if you could even think of age like that for something so otherworldly. It wore what looked like a tunic, a soft beige that seemed to glow with warmth. Its eyes, wow, it's hard to explain, were two intense points of light that felt like diving into an ocean filled with love and wisdom. The being's face held a gentle smile that made me feel completely seen and accepted. Its long, silky hair cascaded over its shoulders, shining like liquid gold. If I could call it skin, it was flawless, giving off an aura of pure serenity. When it spoke, it wasn't through words but through thoughts that connected directly to my mind. "Welcome, Marco," the being said. "I am your guide on this journey." I tried to respond, to ask a bunch of questions, but realized it wasn't necessary. My thoughts and worries were instantly understood by this being. "You have many questions," the guide continued. "That's natural. You've been through a traumatic experience and now find yourself in a place beyond your current understanding. But don't worry, I'm here to guide you and show you things most never get to see." A wave of gratitude and love washed over me, so intense it almost hurt. I felt tears, or whatever the spiritual version of tears is, streaming down my ethereal face. "Why me?" I asked mentally. "Why am I having this experience?" The guide smiled even wider, full of warmth. "Each soul has its own path, Marco. Some need this experience to grow and to grasp greater truths about life. You've been picked for a reason. You've got an important part to play in what's coming. What you're about to see and learn will not only change your life, but could also affect a lot of other people." I was caught off guard and a bit nervous by this news. Me? Important? It felt hard to wrap my head around. The guide must have felt my uncertainty because his light grew even more soothing and warm. Don't stress about the responsibility right now. Soon enough, everything will make sense. For now, just watch and learn. Are you ready to start our journey? I hesitated for a second, but then I felt a kind of bravery I didn't know I had. I nodded, or at least thought about nodding. Then let's go, the guide said. There's a lot to see. With that, we started moving. It wasn't like I was walking or flying in the normal way. It felt like space was shifting around us. We were about to take a trip that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and everything in between. As we floated through this otherworldly space, I noticed something taking shape in the distance. At first, it was just a little sparkle against the horizon, but as we got closer, I realized it was a whole city, not your ordinary city. It was a huge place made entirely of light. Picture the most stunning skyscrapers you've ever seen, but with shimmering structures that look like liquid crystal, glowing in every color you can think of. The buildings didn't look solid, they swayed gently, almost as if they were alive. There were bridges made of light connecting the buildings, and what looked like vehicles made of pure energy darting between them. What is this place? I was curious to ask my guide. This is one of many cities on the spiritual plane, he replied. Here, souls who have wrapped up their journeys on Earth come to rest, learn, and get ready for what's next. As we got nearer, I could make out figures moving around the city. They resembled my guide, beings of light in shapes that were somewhat human. Some were in groups chatting while others seemed lost in their own thoughts. The souls here don't have physical bodies like you think of them, my guide explained. They take on forms that feel right to them based on their memories and how they see themselves. I noticed that some of the figures glowed brighter and were more defined than others. When I asked about that, my guide said, "The brightness you see shows each soul's level of spiritual progress." As we moved through this place, I noticed that the more a soul evolves, the brighter and clearer its energy becomes. We wandered through what seemed like a massive park, but instead of trees and grass, there were swirling forms of energy that shifted and changed colors all the time. It felt like nature was alive and aware. This is a place for healing and renewal, my guide explained. Souls come here to bounce back from tough experiences they've had on Earth. We strolled further into the city and saw buildings that looked like schools or universities. Groups of souls seemed to be gathered, absorbing knowledge in a way I couldn't quite grasp. Learning never stops, my guide said. Even after leaving the physical world, souls keep evolving and gaining wisdom. At one point, we came across a gigantic amphitheater filled with thousands of glowing beings, all focused on a central figure whose light was so bright it was hard to look at directly. "What's happening there?" I asked. "That's a highly evolved soul sharing knowledge and experiences," the guide replied. "You could call him a spiritual master." As we continued exploring the city, each new sight filled me with amazement and curiosity. There were spots that looked like laboratories where souls worked with energies and concepts that were beyond my understanding. I also saw spaces that were like art galleries, but the displays were made of pure light and emotion. Creativity and expression are essential here, my guide said. Every soul has the chance to explore and develop their skills and passions. Despite all the dynamic activity, I noticed a strange yet comforting peace surrounding everything. There was no hurry, no stress, and no signs of conflict. How can that be? I wondered. On Earth, a city this busy would be chaotic. My guide smiled, or at least I felt that way. Every soul here is in sync with its greater purpose. There's no ego or desire to dominate others. Everyone works together for the common good and for their own growth. I was blown away by this idea. A community built on cooperation and shared progress, without the struggles and conflicts we see on Earth. As we were getting ready to leave the city, my guide turned to me and said, "Remember, Marco, what you've witnessed here is just a taste of what's possible. Each realm has its own wonders and challenges. This city shows what souls can achieve when they come together in harmony." I nodded, really moved by what I had just seen, but something inside me felt like our adventure was just getting started. there was so much more to explore and understand. Leaving behind the bright city, we headed toward a totally different scene. To my left, there was a huge field that seemed to stretch on forever, but this wasn't any ordinary field. It was stunning, full of vibrant colors and an energy of pure innocence. The sky above was a blue so deep and bright that it looked unreal, with clouds floating by that changed colors smoothly from pink to gold and then to lavender. Down below, what looked like grass was actually a sea of tiny lights, shimmering like an ocean of stars. Every little movement created waves of color that rippled out in every direction. But what really captured my attention were the kids. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of glowing figures running and playing in the field. Their laughter sounded like music, sending waves of joy through the air that I could actually see. "What is this place?" I asked my guide, amazed. "This is the Field of Innocence," he answered. "It's a space for rest and healing for the youngest souls." I looked closer and noticed that not all the shapes were human kids. Some were baby animals too. I saw glowing puppies chasing luminous kittens and small birds flying gracefully in groups. "Do all living beings have souls?" I asked, surprised. My guide nodded. "Every consciousness, every form of life carries its own divine spark. Here they all get along perfectly." As we watched, something really touched me. A bunch of light children were playing with a massive glowing dog. This creature radiated love and protection, and the kids were laughing as they climbed onto its back. "That's a spirit guide," my angel explained. "It takes the form that is most comforting to children." We continued to observe scenes of pure joy and innocence. I saw light children building castles out of what looked like sand made of stars, while others twirled in circles, their movements creating beautiful patterns of light in the air. "Why do some souls come here instead of that city we saw earlier?" I asked. "Every soul has different needs," my guide replied. "Some, especially those who've had short or tough lives on Earth, need this environment of pure joy and innocence to heal and get ready for their next journeys. About all the kids who pass away too soon due to accidents, illnesses, or violence, it was nice to know there was a place like that waiting for them." While I thought about this, I noticed something interesting. Sometimes one of the glowing kids would blink out for a moment and then come back. "What's going on with them?" I asked. "Oh, you noticed!" my guide replied with a hint of approval. "Some of these souls are getting ready to come back into a new life. When they blink, they're making quick visits to the physical world to get to know their future parents or surroundings." I found that idea fascinating, the thought that souls could flit in and out of different realms. Getting ready for new lives was both unusual and comforting. Before we left the Field of Innocence, my guide said, "Remember, Marco, the purity and joy you see here exists at every level of life on Earth. Sometimes you might forget it, but it's always there, waiting for you to rediscover it." I nodded, feeling really moved. As we drove away, I took one last look at the radiant field. The laughter of the glowing kids lingered in my mind, reminding me of the pure joy that exists beyond what we can comprehend. Our next stop was a place that made my heart race with excitement. In front of us stood a gigantic structure that looked like a library, but on a scale that was out of this world. The building seemed to be made of a shiny material that bent and reflected light in ways that were hard to believe. Its towers soared so high, they looked like they blended right into the sky. Huge doors made of solid gold opened smoothly as we walked up. When we stepped inside, I was totally awestruck, figuratively speaking, since I didn't have a physical body anymore. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. Endless aisles stretched out in every direction, filled with shelves that looked like they just went on forever. But instead of books, the shelves were lined with scrolls of light. "Welcome to the Celestial Library," my guide said. "Here, everything is recorded. Every life, every thought, every action of every soul that ever existed." I was blown away. "You mean every person who ever lived has a record here?" "Not just people," the guide replied. "Every conscious being, every form of life has its record here, from the tiniest bacteria to the most complex civilizations in distant galaxies." I leaned in closer to one of the scrolls. It glowed softly, and as I focused on it, images began to take shape in my mind. It felt like I was watching a movie about someone's life, But it wasn't just the events I was seeing. I could actually feel the thoughts, emotions, and reasons behind every action. "Is this someone's life?" I asked, amazed. "Yes," replied my guide. "Each scroll tells the full story of a soul, their past lives, the lessons they've learned, the challenges they've faced, and those still ahead." I noticed there were beings of light wandering around the library. Some seemed to be really into studying the scrolls, while others were chatting in groups about what they had just read. "Who are they?" I asked. "More advanced souls," my guide explained. "They come here to learn and grasp the patterns of existence. Some are getting ready to guide others, while others are planning their next lives." As we moved through the shelves, I felt more and more amazed. There were sections that seemed to hold the entire history of whole planets and civilizations that had risen and fallen over billions of years. "How is that possible?" I asked. "How can all this information be stored?" My guide smiled, or at least that's how it felt. "What you see is just a version your mind can handle. This library exists outside time and space as you know them. All knowledge, all information exists here at once." We continued exploring and came across a section that looked a little different from the rest. The scrolls here seemed incomplete, parts still forming. "This is the Lives in Progress section," my guide said. "It holds the records of souls that are currently living." Curiosity sparked in me. "Is my record here?" "Yes," the guide replied. "But you're not allowed to see it right now. Knowing too much about your own future could mess with your free will and the lessons you still have to learn." I nodded, grasping the wisdom in that. As we wandered through the library, a deep sense of awe washed over me. Here lay the entire history of existence, all the triumphs and tragedies, all the lessons that had been learned and those yet to come. Before we left, my guide turned to me and said, "Remember, Marco, every action, every thought, every choice we make is recorded here, not for judgment, but as part of the great tapestry of existence. Every life is precious, and every experience matters." When we finally left the Celestial Library, the images and feelings I had experienced there stayed with me, etched into my mind. I knew that this experience would somehow change me fundamentally. The way I would approach life from that moment on, leaving the majestic Celestial Library behind. My guide steered me to a place that felt completely different from anything we had experienced so far. It was like we were drifting in a vast emptiness, surrounded by far-off stars and colorful gas clouds. "What are we going to see now?" I asked, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Now, Marco, you'll get a peek at what the future might hold," my guide answered. "But keep in mind, the future isn't set in stone. What you'll see are options based on humanity's choices." Before I could ask more, the space around us started to shift. It felt like we were watching a super immersive 360-degree movie. Scenes flashed before my eyes, decades and even centuries sliding by in just a few seconds. I saw incredible tech breakthroughs, floating cities, flying cars, and people teleporting. But I also witnessed terrible things: wars, environmental disasters, and global pandemics. It was a lot to take in. "Let's focus on something specific," my guide suggested, noticing my bewilderment. "Think about September 2024. I concentrated, and the images slowed down. I began to see more detailed scenes. It was summer, and the world seemed to be in chaos. There were protests on the streets of major cities, people demanding change, and world leaders arguing passionately. Then, something happened. I saw an incident. Whether it was a natural disaster or something caused by humans, it shook the whole planet. For a moment, everything descended into disorder. But then something extraordinary occurred. I saw people from all walks of life, from different races and cultures, coming together. It was like that event had sparked a collective awakening." "What's happening?" I asked, astonished. "What you're witnessing is a possible turning point for humanity," my guide explained. "A moment when people realize they need to unite to tackle the challenges ahead." I kept watching, captivated. I saw amazing innovations pop up rapidly. New clean energy technologies, ways to clean the oceans, and medical breakthroughs that cured diseases once thought incurable. But what struck me the most was the transformation in people. There was a new level of awareness, a feeling of unity and shared purpose that I had never seen before. "Is this really going to happen?" I asked, feeling both hopeful and doubtful. "Like I mentioned, Marco, the future, isn't set in stone, my guide said. What you're seeing is just one possible future, a road that humanity can choose to take, but it all depends on the choices each person makes every day. I kept watching as scenes played out. I saw people gaining a better grasp of human consciousness and developing skills we would have once thought were supernatural. I watched humanity explore space, setting up colonies on other planets. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were still challenges, conflicts, and problems to tackle. Still, the way people dealt with these issues felt strikingly different. Why am I seeing this? I asked my guide. Why show me this particular future? My guide seemed to think for a moment before answering. Every soul who goes through an experience like yours has a purpose. Some are meant to bring about big changes in the world, while others influence those around them in quieter yet equally important ways. What you're seeing is a reminder of the potential that exists, not just for humanity as a whole, but for you as an individual. I nodded, starting to grasp it. So when I get back, if I get back, should I try to make these things happen? Not exactly, my guide replied. Your role isn't to force a specific future into existence. It's to live your life with awareness, make choices based on love and understanding, and inspire others to do the same. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the simplest actions. As the images of the future began to fade, we found ourselves back in that cosmic void. I was quiet for a moment, processing everything I had seen. There's one more thing you need to see, my guide said, something more personal. The stars around us began to shift again, creating a new scene. This time, I saw an older version of myself, maybe 20 years down the line. I was in an auditorium, talking to a large crowd. I couldn't hear my words, but I could feel their effect on the audience. This is one of many possible futures for you, Marco. My guide explained, a future where you use your experiences to help others and inspire positive change. The scene shifted again, and I saw different versions of myself. One as a scientist working on sustainable technologies, another as a teacher, and yet another as an artist creating works that deeply moved people. Remember, my guide said as the images faded, the future is not set. What you choose to do with what you've learned here is all up to you. I stayed quiet, feeling the weight of everything I had witnessed, but at the same time, a rush of hope and determination came over me. Whatever my part was in the bigger picture, I was ready to take it on. After that intense experience of catching a glimpse of the future, something shifted around me. The vastness of the universe started to fade, and I sensed that our journey was wrapping up. It's time to go back, Marco said, his voice a blend of warmth and seriousness. A mix of emotions hit me. On one hand, I was thankful for everything I had seen and learned, but on the other, the thought of leaving this bright, enlightening space made me feel unexpectedly sad. Do I really have to go back? I asked, surprised by how much I didn't want to leave. Marco smiled gently. Yes, Santiago, your journey on Earth isn't done yet. There's so much more for you to do, experience, and learn. I nodded, getting the wisdom behind his words, but I still felt a tug at my heart, or whatever the spiritual version of that feeling is. What will it be like to return? I asked, a bit nervous. It'll be a transition, Marco explained. You'll start to feel the weight of your physical body again. It might be a bit uncomfortable at first, but it's all part of the process. As he spoke, I began to sense a change. The lightness I had felt throughout this experience started to turn into a heaviness. It was like an invisible force was drawing me back to Earth. Remember, Santiago, Marco said, his voice starting to sound faint. You'll carry the essence of this experience with you, even if the details fade. Trust your instincts, follow your heart, and always keep the love and light from here close to you. I tried to thank him, but I realized I couldn't find the words anymore. The heaviness grew, and I felt a physical pain I hadn't experienced since the accident. The images around me began to blur and dissolve, almost like they were being swept away by a wave of darkness. For a moment, panic set in. I was losing my link to that realm of light and knowledge, and was heading back to the physical world with all its limitations and struggles. But then, right in the middle of that darkness, I felt one last wave of love. Comfort came from my guide, not through words, but just a feeling of support and encouragement. I let myself relax, and suddenly I was swept away. The shift happened quickly, but at the same time felt like it dragged on forever. I felt like I was descending through layers of reality, each one bringing me closer to my physical body. Then, in an instant, I opened my eyes. The bright light made me squint a few times, and gradually my vision cleared. I recognized the place, a hospital room. The smell of antiseptic, the constant beeping from machines, and the rough sheets against my skin all hit me at once. I tried to move and pain shot through me, a harsh reminder of the accident. But I was alive. I had come back. A nurse came in, and as soon as she saw me awake, she quickly called for a doctor. Soon I was surrounded by a medical team, all asking questions and checking my vitals. I barely heard them. My mind was still filled with the images and feelings from the journey I had just experienced. I knew I had gone through something incredible, something that would change my life forever. As the doctors kept working, I closed my eyes for a moment. In the dark, behind my eyelids, I thought I saw a flash of light, almost like a final signal from my angelic guide. I opened my eyes again, ready to face whatever came next. My journey back to life was just beginning. I spent several weeks in the hospital recovering from my injuries. It was a time filled with physical pain, but also deep reflection. Each passing day, the memories of my near-death experience began to fade, like a dream slipping away as I woke up. But the essence of what I went through, the lessons I learned, stayed with me. The doctors were amazed at how quickly I was healing. They called it a medical miracle. But I knew it was more than that. I felt like every cell in my body had been renewed and energized by the light I experienced on the other side. Santiago, my friend who was in the car with me, survived the accident, but his injuries were worse than mine. He was in a coma for several weeks. When he finally woke up, we learned he had lost all memory of the accident and the days leading up to it. Part of me wondered if he had gone through something similar to what I had, but he couldn't recall anything. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I returned home with a fresh perspective on life. The things that used to seem so important, money and material things, started to feel pretty meaningless compared to what I had gone through. I began to notice small things that I never really paid attention to before. The beauty of a sunset, a stranger's smile on the street, the gentle sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Every moment became special, and every interaction felt like a chance to spread some love and understanding. My plans for the future shifted a lot. I still wanted to go to college, but my priorities changed. Instead of chasing after money and status, I found myself looking for ways to make a real difference in the world, to help others, and to encourage the connection and understanding I believed were possible. I started meditating regularly, trying to reconnect with that feeling of peace and unity I discovered during my spiritual journey. Sometimes, during these meditations, I would get flashes of insight that felt like they came from another place. My family and friends noticed I was different. Some thought it was just a phase, a response to the trauma from the accident, while others were curious about my new outlook and came to me for advice. Whenever I could, I shared what I had learned about the importance of love, compassion, and unity. I talked about how every action and every choice we make affects the bigger picture. Sometimes people got it, other times they just looked at me like I was a bit strange, but deep down, I knew I was planting seeds that might one day grow. As time went on, I started to feel a strong gut feeling about the future. I was sure something important was going to happen on September 28th. I didn't know exactly what, but I just knew it was going to be significant. As I geared up for that day, I kept trying to live my life as best as I could, incorporating the lessons I'd learned into my daily routine. I understood that the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we all make every day. Looking back at that summer night in 1998, I realized that what could have been just a terrible tragedy turned out to be the most important and transformative event of my life. The accident that nearly took my life gave me a fresh perspective on what it really means to live. I don't know what the future holds for me or for the world, but I do know that each of us has the power to make a difference and work towards a better future. With that belief in my heart, I take on each new day, feeling really thankful for the second chance I got, and I'm set on making the most of it. My close call that night might have ended, but my real journey, the one about living with purpose and love, was just kicking off. So, what did you think of this amazing story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Let's spread the word and show more people that there's so much more to life than what we can see.